Everyone, and welcome into another week of Froggy Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe. My name is Ryan Peters, and I'm joined by the greatest middle school football coach in the United States, not just Indiana, Joe Spilman. Joe, how are you doing?
Well, Ryan, you give me way too much credit because we happened to play a little team called Scottsburg last night, and the middle school team didn't fare too well. I saw a lot of good things, but I am by far the greatest middle school football coach in the United States. I'll say that.
Well, you're definitely the greatest middle school football coach in this Froggy studio right now.
Yeah.
I mean, at the very least.
Right. I would say that I am the greatest middle school football coach inside the Froggy studio here in VV, Indiana right now. I agree with that.
And I take that, fact checkers. So I appreciate everybody tuning in for another week. We got three great topics with you, finishing it off with an interview with the Switzerland County High School football coach, Ryan Jessup, at the end. But let's go ahead and get to topic number one. Joe, I thought about this earlier, and I sent it to you, and I said, get your brain moving, okay? Because there's a new Netflix documentary out on one of my favorite players, at least at his time at Notre Dame, on Manti Te'o. And obviously Manti Te'o's collegiate career, not anything like his professional career, and we won't even talk about the dating scene, but it had me thinking on what collegiate or amateur player, if you want to put it that way, did you follow and emotionally invest in and thought, this guy is going to be awesome. I hope he's on my favorite team. And then out of the time that he put on a professional uniform, he just absolutely stunk it up. Is there a guy that comes to mind to you, or more than one if you have multiple?
So when we talk about this topic, Ryan, I want to be clear, right? We are talking about players that, we're not doing the biggest draft bust of all time, anything like that. We are simply talking about players that we looked at coming out of college that we thought were going to do great things. And we emotionally invested in them to say, hey, I can't wait to see what this guy does on whatever team that I'm going to watch. Correct?
Joe, this is Froggy Sports Talk with Ryan and Joe. So I want Ryan's opinion, which is myself, not gonna Bo Jackson this or Ricky Henderson it, and I want your opinion. So yes, the two of us who we personally, because we could all just go and do the clickbait list thing and pretend we work for Bleacher Report and like, oh yeah, top 10 biggest bust of all time. No, I want our personal ones to make it a little bit more interesting, in my opinion.
Well then, Ryan, I'm going to go with a player, or I actually have a couple that come to mind. As you know, and anybody that has been following the show knows that I'm a huge Bengals fan. You're a huge Bengals fan. And a lot of times, and I just grew up this way, Saturdays is for college football, Sundays is for the NFL, Monday nights is for the NFL, Thursdays nights are for the NFL. So, that's just, kind of how I grew up and looked at it. And I emotionally invested in teams like the University of Cincinnati, Ohio State, local teams to where I grew up. And as you know, being a huge UC fan, there has been a little bit of talent come out of there, but the talent that's come out of there recently in the NFL haven't really been bust, right? And prior to, say the last 15 years, there wasn't really much coming out of the University of Cincinnati. You watched those players play on Saturday, but you kind of knew that their career ended there on Saturday. So being a Bengals fan, I always kind of looked toward the draft and looked at players and what they did in college. And they're when you're a Bengals fan and you look back at the history of the Bengals and being emotionally invested in that team, there are so many players that come to mind when you start talking about draft bust. And, I don't want to sit here and be generic and say Johnny Manziel or Byron Leftwich or players like that. I want to give you players that aren't necessarily maybe the biggest draft bust in history with the Bengals. But, I debated this one because when I was a kid, I remember the talk of the town being about Kajana Carter when he came out of college. And he was going to be the running back. And I think he was taken – he may have been taken first overall, if I remember.
It was a top 5 pick. It was a little bit before me, but I know it's a top 5 pick.
So, and I was young too, but I remember that being the hype. I know there was a lot of Kajana Carter memorabilia going around and things of that nature. So I was excited to see him. But the more I started thinking about this topic, Ryan, that is kind of I can't really go with Kajana Carter, because if you look back on the history, I don't think Kajana Carter, he had an 8-year season or an 8-year career. And over the life of his 8-year career, I don't think he ever rushed for more than 500 yards in a single season. But his very first preseason game ever for the Bengals, he had an injury, essentially a rookie season-ending injury at that point. So I think really injury caused Kajana Carter to be a bust over his career, because he had injury after injury. Mm-hmm. And I don't really want to categorize him as a bust. I think he had an 8-year career, and I don't think he lived up to expectations in Cincinnati. So the player that I'm going to go with, and I don't think this would be a surprise to anybody that is a Bengals fan, would have to be Akili Smith. So Akili Smith was drafted in 1999, right? He came out of Oregon, had a great senior season, and everybody expected the world out of Akili Smith, right? If you remember back to 1999, everybody thought Akili Smith would turn that program around. We were going to be in the playoffs. We expected out of Akili Smith what we have seen out of Joe Burrow, if that makes sense here.
He had a more storied college career than Joe Burrow. I mean, Joe Burrow really was a flash in the pan for 1 year in college compared to what Akili Smith did in college.
Yeah, well, I would give Joe Burrow 2 years. I think he did 2 years, but I agree. And Akili Smith, though, if you look back at his career, he had a very consistent college career at Oregon, but he had a great senior season. And if I remember right, and this is coming off the top of my head, I think maybe he was 3rd overall pick in 99, if I remember. And I could be wrong. He was definitely top 5. But he came out, and he was absolutely horrible. And for 3 seasons with the Bengals, I'm talking terrible, Ryan. And the expectations went from, we're going to get to the playoffs, we're going to be a contender, to we got to get rid of this guy. And the sheer disappointment that Akili Smith brought to the city of Cincinnati. And I remember all the rumors, and I don't know if they're true or not. It came out that, well, Akili Smith isn't able to play at the NFL level because Akili Smith can't read. I don't know if those are true, but those were definitely rumors, that were flashing around the city of Cincinnati.
Joe, you just need 2 letters, X and O.
Right. Well, you got to understand where the arrows go to, and what the line means.
He might have been dyslexic too, huh?
Right. Yeah.
That's
the
tough.
Dotted line. So, I would say the player that I've emotionally invested in, and the team that I emotionally invested in, their biggest bust in my memory, in my lifetime, has been Akili Smith. So what about yours?
There's a lot of people in their car or in their house listening right now, Joe, that are like, yeah, that's the guy I was going to say. Especially if they're going within the last, 20, 30 years. Right. I think a lot of people listening, and I can't bring this one up because, again, I didn't watch. I know he wasn't a great head coach, maybe he busts that way, but a lot of people would say Steve Alford. I think there's a lot of people that, thought he would for sure just walk on water in the state of Indiana for the rest of the time if he had a basketball. So I just want to get that out there. Again, I didn't watch Steve Alford play, so I'm not going to say Steve Alford. So the guy I'm going to choose is a guy from Dublin, Ohio, and he ended up returning the Irish program, okay? Because Irish, after Lou Holtz, really suffered, and they were trying to find anyone. They ended up hiring a guy coming out of the New England Patriots and Charlie Weiss. And with Charlie Weiss, he brought a quarterback named Brady Quinn. Now, I've told you before, the Irish are what got me into football, okay? And Brady Quinn was my touchdown Jesus. I mean, he set all the records while he was there. He just completely changed the offense. I mean, and what Notre Dame was able to accomplish took them to, I believe it was a Fiesta Bowl where they end up getting killed by Ohio State, which is, still true to this day, how they play Ohio State. But coming out of college, working with Charlie Weiss, the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots, I said, this guy is a can't-miss product. Now, what typically happens with people that come out of Notre Dame that I really love, they get drafted in the AFC North, whether it's Stephon Tuitt, Kyle Hamilton this past year. Insert player that I really care about, they end up getting drafted in the AFC North. And it was no different with Brady Quinn, who was taken by the Cleveland Browns. And I said, this is the guy. This is the guy that's got, the guy that has the football jersey and it has the list of all the NFL players that ever donned the Browns uniform, the quarterbacks, right below Tim Couch, a few players down, and Jake Delhomme and Jeff Garcia and all these other garbage players. I said, Brady Quinn is going to be the guy that ends it. And he most certainly was not. And I put a lot of that on the Browns. I think that when it comes to a professional football team or any professional sport, I do think it really does matter where you land. And I think that the Browns were the worst possible scenario for Brady Quinn, for his development to take off. And maybe that's just, again, a guy that I'm completely biased towards. I'm not going to hide that at all, because I just thought he was it. I mean, he played in a pro-style offense. He made all the right throws. He made players that ended up playing baseball look good, like Jeff Samardzija. I mean, the guy turned down first or second round money to play baseball. He was a guy that I used to go to Walmart and buy all the Topps football cards just to get his rookie card, because I'm like, I'm going to live off of this one day when he enters the Hall of Fame. And instead, I got these garbage rookies of Calvin Johnson and Adrian Peterson, but I never could get Brady Quinn. And maybe the Lord knew something before I ever did, because those are worth just a little bit more than Brady Quinn's rookie card. But that's a guy, after looking at this Manti Te'o Netflix film that I'll probably end up watching by the end of this week, that if you can emotionally invest in something, Joe, I was it. I was all in. Hook, line, and sinker. Brady Quinn was my guy. I was top of the pep club, and I was looking for a job within a few years.
So you do know, Ryan, that Cleveland, and now I'm looking at it, I'm thinking Jacksonville Jaguars as well, but Cleveland Browns and Cleveland are where quarterbacks go to die. You realize that, right?
Well, and see, you got to have hope. I mean, there's a ton of people that would say that Cincinnati was a place where careers go to die. And, obviously we would change that a little bit because they've had a lot more success recently than, say, the Browns have, at least in terms of winning the division. But no, I thought he was he played under touchdown Jesus. I mean, if he can't bring in holy water, who could? Well, and the answer is nobody so far.
Well, and Ryan, I kind of want to, talk about your point there and Brady Quinn, coming out of college. And I think maybe that's why I've distanced myself from evaluating players in college and thinking what they're going to do in the NFL, because we have seen it so many times throughout, I mean, just look at the last 30 years. One of who I thought was one of the better college football players of his time, Tim Tebow. Now, we knew that Tim Tebow, or at least I did at the time, I had enough football sense at the time to know that Tim Tebow wasn't going to come out of college and really contribute in the NFL. Now, I will say the shot that Tim Tebow did have in the NFL, all he did was win. I mean, you can't take that away from him, but
right.
His style of play wasn't real conducive to many NFL offenses at the time, and is still not. But you look at players like Cordell Jones out of Ohio State. There's a lot of players that do very well under a college-style offense that come to the NFL, and I won't even say that they're outclassed. It's just not their level of play, and it's not the game that they learned how to play their entire lives.
Yeah, and I think especially you would know this, Joe, is that some quarterbacks are just not made to read defenses. I mean, they have 40,000 different cards, whether it has Quagmire from Family Guy on it or a pair of socks that say, hey, this is a cover 3. And by that, he knows who now the new primary target is. Quarterbacks in college, I mean, they're literally micromanaged as much as you can. You get into the NFL, Joe, you can't do that anymore. Those windows became that much smaller because everybody runs 4.4s and 4.5s compared to what you're throwing against middle linebackers like a Manti Te'o who runs a 4.8, which is extremely slow in today's NFL. And,
right.
It changes things. And there's another guy and I'll make this a little bit of a homer one. I'll wrap it up pretty quickly and let you get another one in. But it was a pair. I thought the next linebackers to ever come to the Cincinnati Bengals and don the stripes, David Pollock and Odell Thurman, I thought for sure can't miss, will be guys that like a Takeo Spikes, just guys that were going to solidify the Cincinnati defense for a decade, if not longer. One ended up breaking his neck and had to retire, and David Pollock. The other one couldn't stop, with his demons in terms of alcohol abuse, and thankfully he's turned it around. He's been working at Georgia now, but those were two guys completely emotionally vested in that just
Right.
did not pan out as well.
Well, yeah. When you talk about David Pollock was going to be really good and was going to have a really good career. And that's kind of like, when we started this and I brought up Kajana Carter, I really don't want to, because injuries happen and they're going to happen in the NFL or any sport. And I really don't want to, even professional athletes, I really don't want to put them down because of an injury and say, that they were a bust. But I understand what you're saying about David Pollock. He wasn't necessarily a bust. It was just kind of letting you down. One of the bigger busts that I think in Cincinnati history, if we're going to homer this a little bit more, is Peter Warrick. But I think that goes along the lines with Akili Smith. I don't really think Peter Warrick was ever given a fair shot playing the wide receiver position in Cincinnati because he didn't have a competent quarterback to run an offense at the time. So,
right.
We started off the show and I said that the list could go on and on with Cincinnati. I mean, and really throughout the history of sports. And it's really such an interesting topic that really, anybody could sit around and talk about all day, because you go to any program, you go to any NFL team, any college program, there's going to be a list at every one of those schools that people thought were, this guy is just the next coming of Johnny Football, who was a huge bust, by the way, and turned out not to be able to, not able to do anything as they progressed into the professional leagues.
Yeah, I completely agree. Again, that's what makes it fun of being a fan and what makes it disheartening being a fan. Hopefully we have more guys that come out of, diamonds in the rough that, we never thought were going to be anything when they entered the team and then turn up to be gold, like say a Geno Atkins. So hopefully, Joe, our time is turning around when it comes to that. But we're going to take a quick break and come back with a next topic. This is the Froggy Sports Show with Ryan and Joe. Again, we're live here at Froggy 95.9. We're also on the Grilling Truth if you missed out, but we will be right back for topic number 2 right after the break.
What's up, guys? I'm Mike Goodpasser from the Grilling Truth Sports Network. I want to thank you guys for listening here to Ryan and Joe on the Sports Hour. And I want to remind you, the Grilling Truth Sports Network is powered and brought to you by betting.net. Betting.net is the best bet for betting the online casino or sports book that's right for you. Make sure you check them out now, guys, at betting.net. This is a great service. If you live in Indiana or you live in Kentucky or you live in Ohio, if you go on betting.net, it will actually take you to the best sites to legally bet in the state you live in. Make sure you check them out at betting.net. And right now, we're going to go back to Ryan and Joe at the Sports Hour. What's up, guys? I'm Mike Goodpasser from the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I want to thank you guys for listening here to Ryan and Joe on the Sports Hour. And I want to remind you, the Grueling Truth Sports Network is powered and brought to you by betting.net. Betting.net is the best bet for betting the online casino or sports book that's right for you. Make sure you check them out now, guys, at betting.net. This is a great service. If you live in Indiana or you live in Kentucky or you live in Ohio, if you go on betting.net, it will actually take you to the best sites to legally bet in the state you live in. Make sure you check them out at betting.net. And right now, we're going to go back to Ryan and Joe at the Sports Hour.